his understudies to think and utilize unadulterated rationale to conclude the shelter home. Everybody is given more data about the person they are playing, for instance. James is as yet a natural rancher yet is really gay, and Georgina the muscular specialist might have been presented to the hazardous Ebola infection during her work abroad. While the gathering votes in favor of James to be picked, since he may as yet decide to deliver posterity, the danger of the infection finishing the analysis prompts Georgina being removed in view of the additional pieces of information on the shelter. Inhabitants change to incorporate the multifaceted investments director, the realtor and the servant, to not L out on the last spot in the shelter. In this second round, Mr. Zimmett closes the distributed artist once more, even before his extra data is uncovered alongside different understudies who neglected to acquire a spot. Georgina communicates her expectation to head to somewhere safe and secure before the blasts. Anyway, they are ineffective in surpassing the impacts. Then again, the triumphant gathering and Mr. Zimmett hurry to the security of the dugout to authoritatively start the second round of the trial one night. When Petra strolls in on James and Jack the science researcher, it is uncovered to the gathering that Jack is gay as a general rule also, to remain consistent with the qualities of his personality. James won't be with Petra in any event. For saving people, this prompts the significant conversation of starting a pregnancy. Inside the year in the gathering, and Petra winds up matched with Mr. Zimmett for this reason. Anyway, regardless of there being a few different pairings in the gathering, there are no pregnancies. Even following 10 weeks in the fortification, this causes Mr. Zimmett to report that the 4 young ladies should consent to various accomplices to forestall the eradication of human existence. Accordingly, Bonnie, the trooper, strikingly takes steps to end him, assuming he powers such a standard with practically no feeling of ethical quality in a fury. Mr. Zimmett undermines the gathering with a weapon and makes everybody pass on the room. Aside from Bonnie anyway, obscure to Mr. Zimmett, Jack figures out how to remain concealed in the room when Mr. Zimmett points his firearm at Bonnie. Jack handles him and in the end wounds him with a pencil. The second round of the trial unexpectedly reaches a conclusion when Mr. Zimmett irately opens the entry of the dugout and opens everybody to the outside radiation back in class. Impulse drives James to find that the container they all drew their cards from had secret compartments. Thus obviously their instructor manipulated the cards, so James and Petra picked precisely those cards that he needed them to. Mr. Zimmett endeavors to explain that he essentially intended to show James a thing or two about his honor. He adds that he needed to more readily set him up for this present reality that is unique in relation to the deceptions he believes are reality, all of which James will not accept. Rather, he requests a third round of the trial. Since Petra concurs with James, it prompts Mr. Zimmett supporting a third round too, on another oceanside area. This time Petra requests to the gathering to allow her to choose the fortification home. When they concur, she picks the ranges of abilities and callings that were all dismissed in the previous rounds. For being non-specialized, this implies she allows in the winebarker, the style fashioner, the distributed artist, the mentally unbalanced harpist, the muscular specialist, and the drama vocalist, regardless of giving motivations to why she might want to incorporate these understudies. Mr. Zimmett sees her choices is drained of any rationale and keeps diminishing Petra's last level for the subject. In spite of her failing level, she decides to add James for variety and even incorporates Parker, the gelato producer, who is additionally gay in reality with just 2 additional openings remaining. Mr. Zimmett desires Petra to pick cleverly a lot to his failure. Petra adds James to the 10th opening in the dugout, having tricked Mr. Zimmett ahead of time. Petra and the others then, at that point, force Mr. Zimmett to leave subsequently, guaranteeing that he doesn't partake in that frame of mind round at all. When he attempts to contend that he is the one in particular who realizes the leave code, Bonnie's extra characteristic of having eidetic memory demonstrates him totally superfluous when she discusses the code after Mr. Zimmett takes off. Petra explains that she didn't mean to save herself in this round, and on second thought adds Chips the craftsman in the last opening of the shelter anyway. Without a second to spare, Chips figures out how to switch himself with Petra in the shelter and urges everybody staying to go along with him and take their boat to somewhere safe and secure in spite of the rough starting points of the third round. Their year in the shelter goes by with the gathering engaging themselves with cards, wine poker, and an acting Shakespeare. Also, Their distributed artist recounts unique verse consistently to guarantee energy. Among the gathering for their future imagination gets Petra and James to assemble machine parts accessible in the shelter, to make a harp for their harpist who then even performs for the gathering, with their drama following an extended period of conferring his insight to his group of 20 understudies. Mr. Zemet, the way of thinking educator, chooses to test the abilities of the graduating seniors on their last day of school. He expresses that while the information they presently have will assist them with having a decent existence in the rest of the world, it is additionally critical to contemplate what might occur, assuming the world, as they probably are aware, basically fails to exist one day. For this, Mr. Zemet proposes a psychological test that drives the class to envision the world closure and taking sanctuary in a dugout for a year to survive the radiolog ICAL impacts of the nuclear holocaust anyway, since the exceptional and completely supplied shelter can protect just 10 individuals for a year, and the class has 21 individuals including Mr. Zemet. He requires the disposal of the undeserving contender. To save humanity from termination, to choose the value of his understudies, Mr. Zemet gets everybody to haphazardly draw cards from a crate that relegates different callings to them. The smartest understudy in class, Petra, will be an underlying specialist, while her sweetheart James is a natural rancher. Different callings incorporate a couple of valuable ranges of abilities like that of a woodworker, an electrical expert, or a muscular specialist, and furthermore, a couple of others, like a realtor, a mutual funds chief, and a style creator, which would basically be of no genuine use notwithstanding a real debacle in a stunning move. Mr. Zemet Krui closes the existence of the understudy who was picked. Being a distributed writer, he legitimizes this demonstration by saying that they must be quick and ruthless, while filling the shelter with genuinely significant abilities. In the event that we're to view saving humanity in a serious way, he specifies that he will stay a special case through the examination, and that no one will realize his definite range of abilities. The class then, at that point, continues to decide on the shelter spaces, in light of the positive places of their callings, while Georgina, the muscular specialist, is effortlessly casted a ballot in Russell. The harpist is removed in the wake of deciding to acknowledge the apparently significant expert abilities of a craftsman, electrical expert, representative natural rancher, science researcher, psychotherapist, primary architect, and fighter the class. Then, at that point, continues on to choosing the last shelter occupant, picking either a show vocalist and Mr. Zemet with his undisclosed abilities. Mr. Zemet, in the end, wins the last space in the shelter to save the excess understudies from confronting their finishes by radiation. Mr. Zemet closes them all similarly as the harassed prior to seeing his fierce ways. Petra tells the gathering that she would rather not enjoy a whole year in that frame of mind with somebody like Mr. Zemet. Hearing this, James, the natural rancher of the gathering, gets everybody to assemble harvests and spices from their environmental factors and sets a mysterious strategy in motion as needs be. Joined collectively of 9 against their educator, everybody accumulates at the dugout before time and effectively locks Mr. Zemet out sometime later. Petra gets to the entry of the fortification and sees Mr. Zemet in the repercussions of the nuclear blasts. He holds up a note saying that he realizes the leave code of the shelter, the remainder of the gathering. Then, at that point, talks about whether their instructor is tell the truth, yet they have no real way to be aware, without a doubt, other than to endure the remainder of the year in the shelter. In spite of being just 9 individuals in the shelter rather than 10 questions about their educator's rationale and his special case range of abilities bring about the possible destruction of the gathering, remaining in the fortification turns out to be an exercise in futility. Since after over a year spent in the shelter, they couldn't leave the dugout without a leave code as they run out of food and different supplies, the gathering at last meets its end. Back in class, Mr. Zemet uncovers his calling to have been a shelter developer, which makes sense of why just he realized the leave code. After the fruitless run of the psychological test, he proposed a second round, since the class currently had a superior thought of the whole circumstance, while the end of the world and the fortification continue as before. This time, too, it occurs at another area, and with an extra curve, Mr. Zemet adds, delivering no less than one sound. child during the year, and the fortification is a necessity for an effective round to additional power. Do you want to see part 2 of this video? Subscribe to the channel and comment part 2. Thanks for watching. I would see you at part 2.